In a sweltering Atlanta courtroom, 18-year-old Kiana Brooks stood shackled, her lips curling into a smirk as the judge barked for her plea on a bank heist charge. Everyone expected a trembling teen, but she jerked a CIA badge from her sleeve, flashing it with icy defiance. Gasps exploded, the judge's jaw dropped, and officers Hargrove and Tillman seethed from the back, their scheme cracking. The prosecutor scoffed, "Fake," hinting her bold move might torch her future. What twisted game just ignited? Before we dive in, let us know where you're watching from, and if you stand for justice, hit like and subscribe, because tomorrow's wild episode is one you can't miss. Kiana Brooks trudged through the cracked sidewalks of East Atlanta, her sneakers scuffing against the uneven pavement as the sun dipped low, painting the sky a bruised purple. It was a humid Tuesday in late May, and the 18-year-old senior from Carver High had just wrapped up a grueling robotics club meeting. Her mind buzzed with equations and servo motor designs, all fuel for her dream of cracking MIT's engineering program on a full ride. She adjusted her backpack, heavy with textbooks and a battered laptop, her braids swinging lightly with each step. The air smelled of fried chicken from a nearby joint and exhaust from the buses rumbling down Flat Shoals Avenue. She was 3 blocks from home, close enough to hear her mum Latrice humming gospel through the kitchen window, when the world flipped upside down. A squad car screeched around the corner, tires biting asphalt, red and blue lights slashing through, the dusk like jagged knives. Kiana's stomach tightened, an instinct honed by years of whispered warnings from Latrice about cops in this neighborhood. She kept walking, head down, hands loose at her sides, just like she'd been taught. The car lurched to a stop 10 feet ahead, doors flying open, and 2 officers spilled out, their boots thumping the ground with purpose. Officer Hargrove, a wiry man with a buzz cut and a permanent sneer, led the charge, his pale skin flushed red from the heat or something uglier. Officer Tillman followed, broader, with a thick neck and eyes that glinted like polished steel, his hand already resting on the grip of his pistol. "Stop right there, girl," Hargrove barked, his voice sharp enough to slice through the evening. Chatter of crickets and distant car horns. Kiana froze, her pulse hammering in her throat, every muscle locking tight. She wasn't naive. She'd seen the news, heard the stories, knew how fast routine could turn to funeral for someone who looked like her. "Hands where I can see 'em," he added, stepping closer, his breath sour with coffee and spite. She lifted her palms slowly, her backpack sliding down one shoulder, her eyes flicking between the 2 men. Tillman circled to her left, cutting off her path, his boots crunching a discarded soda can. "What's this about?" Kiana asked, forcing her voice steady despite the tremor clawing up her spine. She stood 5'5", slight but wiry from years of tinkering with machines, her worn black hoodie and faded jeans screaming ordinary. Nothing about her said trouble, yet Hargrove's lip curled as if she'd spat in his face. "You know." "Damn well," he snapped, his accent thick with South Georgia gravel. "Bank got hit 3 miles up the road and you fit the bill." His eyes raked over her, lingering on her dark skin, her braids, the way she stood defiant even with her hands up. "People like you always steal something," Kiana's jaw clenched, heat flooding her cheeks. "I've been at school all day, robotics club. Check my teachers, my classmates, anybody." Her words came quick, sharp, but Hargrove laughed, a dry barking sound that made her skin crawl. Tillman smirked, pulling a pair of cuffs from his belt, the metal glinting in the fading light. "Shut your mouth," Tillman growled, his voice low and guttural. "We don't need your excuses." He stepped forward, yanking her arms behind her back with a jerk that made her gasp. The cuffs snapped on, cold steel biting into her wrists, tighter than necessary, grinding against bone, until she felt a warm trickle of blood seep under the metal. She winced, biting her lip to stifle a cry, but Tillman just tightened them more, his knuckles brushing her spine as he leaned in close. "Keep acting smart. See where it gets you." Hargrove rifled through her backpack, tossing her physics textbook into the dirt, its pages flapping open like wounded wings. He dumped out her calculus notes, her lunch thermos clanking against the pavement, and then paused, fishing out a slim leather wallet that wasn't hers. Kiana's eyes widened, her breath catching as he flipped it open, revealing a stack of crisp 20s and a driver's license she'd never seen. "Well, look at this," he said, holding it up like a trophy, his grin feral. "Stolen goods right here. Told you she's a thief." "That's not mine," Kiana shouted, twisting against the cuffs, the pain shooting up her arms. "You put that there. I don't even know where it came from." Her voice cracked, desperation bleeding through, but Hargrove just chuckled, pocketing the wallet as evidence. Tillman shoved her toward the squad car, his meaty hand clamping her shoulder. "Hard enough to bruise." "Tell it to the judge, Princess," Hargrove said, slamming the backpack shut and kicking it aside. "Fancy schoolgirl act won't save you now." Kiana stumbled, her sneakers scraping the curb, her mind racing. She'd spent her life proving she was more than the stereotypes they pinned on her, clawing her way to a 4.0 GPA, a scholarship, a future. Now these two were tearing it apart, and she couldn't fathom why. A flicker of movement caught her eye. Mrs. Jenkins, the old widow from across the street, peering out her window, phone in hand, recording. Kiana's heart leapt. Proof. Someone saw this. "She's filming you," she blurted, nodding toward the house. "You can't just—" But Tillman spun, fast as a snake, and stormed over. He snatched the phone from Mrs. Jenkins's trembling grip, smashed it against the porch railing with a crack that echoed down the block, and tossed the shards into the bushes. "Mind your business, hag," he snarled, stomping back. Mrs. Jenkins shrank behind her curtain, and Kiana's hope withered. No one else dared step out. The street went silent, save for the hum of the squad car's engine and the faint wail of a siren miles off. Hargrove opened the back door, and Tillman shoved her inside, her head banging against the frame. She landed hard on the cracked vinyl seat, the cuffs digging deeper, blood now staining her sleeves. The door slammed shut, locking her in a cage of stale air and flickering shadows from the lights outside. Hargrove climbed into the driver's seat, his eyes meeting hers in the rearview mirror, cold and unyielding. "You're done, girl," he said, his voice dripping with venom. "Nobody's going to believe a word you say." Tillman slid in beside him, cracking his knuckles, a satisfied grunt escaping his throat as they pulled away. Kiana's chest heaved, her breath shallow, panic clawing at her ribs. She replayed the day. Robotics club until 6, the bus ride home, the walk. She'd been nowhere near a bank, hadn't even passed one. This wasn't a mistake. It was a setup, and the weight of that truth crushed her. Her wrists throbbed. Her hoodie clung to her sweat-soaked skin, and her mind spun with questions. Why her? What did they want? She thought of Latrice, waiting with a plate of collards and cornbread, oblivious to the storm about to hit. Her scholarship, her MIT dreams, her whole life teetered on the edge of this lie. Through the smudged window, she saw the neighborhood blur by, the barber shop with its flickering neon sign, the corner store where she'd bought gum 100 times, the mural of MLK Jr. peeling off a brick wall. It all felt distant now, like a memory she might never reclaim. Hargrove cranked the radio, static buzzing before a dispatcher's voice cut through, confirming her arrest. "Suspect in custody, female, black 18, bank robbery on Peachtree," it droned, and Tillman laughed, a deep guttural sound that vibrated through the car. Kiana squeezed her eyes shut, forcing herself to focus. She wasn't just some kid they could bury. She had something they didn't know about, something tucked away in her bag. The CIA badge, earned through a classified STEM outreach program she'd aced last summer, was her ace. She'd kept it secret, per protocol, but if they found it, if they checked it, maybe she could turn this around. Her fingers twitched, useless behind her back, as she pictured its sleek design. Her name, the eagle emblem, the promise of a future they couldn't touch. Yet doubt gnawed at her. Would they even care? Or would they twist that too? The car jolted over a pothole, snapping her eyes open. Hargrove muttered something to Tillman, too low to catch, but the tone was smug, conspiratorial. They weren't just rogue, they were hunters, and she was prey. Her skin prickled as the precinct loomed ahead, a squat concrete block squatting, under sodium lights. 3 miles from a bank she'd never seen, and they'd pinned it on her with a wallet she'd never touched. This wasn't random. It was personal, and the realization sank into her bones like lead. As they dragged her out, the night air hit her face, thick with humidity and the tang of gasoline. Her legs wobbled, but she straightened, glaring at Hargrove's back. She wouldn't break. Not yet. She'd built robots that could navigate mazes, cracked codes for fun. She could navigate this. But as Tillman's grip tightened, steering her toward the precinct doors, a chill slithered down her spine. This wasn't just about tonight. This was war, and they'd fired the first shot. The precinct doors clanged shut behind Kiana Brooks, sealing her into a fluorescent-lit purgatory that reeked of bleach and stale cigarette smoke. Her wrists ached, the cuffs cutting deep enough to leave raw red welts, blood crusting where the metal had gnawed her skin. Officer Hargrove shoved her forward, his bony fingers digging into her shoulder, while Officer Tillman lumbered behind, his boots echoing on the scuffed linoleum. The air buzzed with static from a dispatcher's radio, voices crackling about unrelated chaos in Atlanta's underbelly. Kiana's stomach churned, her hoodie damp with sweat, as they marched her past a row of desks where cops glanced up, their eyes cold, dismissive, or outright hostile. Was this how it started for everyone else who never made it out? They shoved her into a holding room, a concrete box with a single flickering bulb dangling from the ceiling like a noose. Hargrove kicked her backpack onto a steel table, its contents spilling out. Her physics textbook thudded to the floor, her laptop teetered on the edge, her thermos rolled with a hollow clank. "Search her," he barked at Tillman, who cracked, his knuckles with a grin that made Kiana's skin crawl. She stood rigid, hands locked behind her, as Tillman patted her down, his meaty palms lingering too long on her hips, her thighs, his breath hot and sour against her neck. "What's a little thief like you hiding, huh?" he muttered, his voice thick with menace. Hargrove unzipped her bag, rummaging with deliberate malice. He flipped through her calculus notebook, tearing a page loose just to watch it flutter down, then yanked out the planted wallet, waving it like a flag. "Caught you red-handed," he sneered, his buzz cut casting jagged shadows on the wall. Kiana's chest tightened, her voice hoarse as she forced it out. "That's not mine. You planted it. I've got nothing to hide." Her words bounced off him, useless as pebbles against steel. Then his fingers brushed something else, a slim pouch tucked into a hidden flap beneath her laptop. He pried it open, and there it was, her CIA internship badge, gleaming under the harsh light. Kiana's breath hitched. The badge was her secret weapon, earned through a classified STEM program she'd aced last summer, a ticket to a future beyond this nightmare. Her name, Kiana Brooks, was etched in crisp font beside the eagle emblem, a symbol of something these two couldn't touch. Hargrove held it up, squinting, then let out a dry, barking laugh that echoed off the walls. "What's this garbage?" he said, tossing it onto the table like it was a fast food wrapper. "Some fake ID you cooked up? Think we're that stupid?" Tillman snorted, stepping back to lean against the door, his bulk blocking her only exit. "It's real," Kiana snapped, her voice trembling but firm. "Call my liaison agent, Pierce. He'll tell you. I'm in a government program, not some bank robber." Her heart pounded, a frantic drumbeat urging her to fight, to make them see. Hargrove's sneer widened, his eyes glinting with something darker than disbelief. "Government program for you?" He spat the word "you" like it burned his tongue, his gaze raking over her black skin, her braids, her defiance. "Don't waste my time with fairy tales." He pocketed the badge, turning away as if she'd ceased to exist. Tillman grabbed her arm, hauling her toward a cell at the hall's end. The door screeched open, revealing a 6x8 cage with a rusted bench and a cracked toilet in the corner. A woman already sat there, her hair matted, her clothes reeking of cheap whiskey. She leered at Kiana as Tillman shoved her in, the cuffs clanking against the bench as she stumbled. "Fresh meat," the drunk slurred, lurching closer. "What's a pretty black thing like you do in here? Steal something you shouldn't?" Her words dripped with venom, and Kiana recoiled, pressing against the wall, the cold concrete biting through her hoodie. The cell door slammed shut, the sound a gunshot in her ears. Hargrove lingered outside, his silhouette looming through the bars. "Sit tight, princess. We'll sort your little story out," he said, his tone mocking before vanishing with Tillman. Kiana sank onto the bench, her wrists throbbing, her mind racing. The drunk kept muttering racial taunts, slurring into nonsense, But Kiana tuned her out, focusing on the badge. They had it. If they checked it, if Pierce answered, she might walk free. But what if they didn't? What if they buried it? Buried. Her hours crawled by, the bulb's flicker syncing with her pounding headache. She replayed the arrest, the planted wallet, the smashed phone, Hargrove's glee. This wasn't random, it was a trap, and she was the prey. Her mum's face flashed in her mind, Latrice pacing their tiny apartment, probably calling her phone, getting no answer. Kiana had no way to reach her, no way to explain. The precinct's hum grew distant, swallowed by the drunk's snores, until a new sound jolted her upright, the jangle of keys. The door swung open, and a woman stormed in, her braids tight, her eyes blazing with fury. Latrice Brooks, all 5'2" of her, looked ready to tear the building down. "Where's my baby?" she demanded, her voice cutting through the stale air. A young cop trailed her, his badge reading Officer Reese, his face pale and nervous. Hargrove appeared behind them, his sneer faltering as Latrice zeroed in on Kiana. "You okay, Kai?" she asked, rushing to the bars, her hands gripping them tight. "I'm fine, Mama," Kiana lied, her voice cracking. "They're lying. I didn't do anything." Latrice whirled on Hargrove, her finger jabbing the air. "You let her go right. Now. She's a good girl, top of her class, not some criminal." Hargrove crossed his arms, his lip curling. "Good girl, huh? Tell that to the bank she hit. Or maybe you're in on it, welfare queen." The slur hit Latrice like a slap, but she didn't flinch, her eyes narrowing to slits. "She's got a CIA badge," Kiana cut in, desperate. "Tell them to call Agent Pierce." Latrice nodded, turning to Reese. "You heard her. Check it." Hargrove laughed, but Reese hesitated, his fingers twitching toward his radio. "Don't waste your time, kid," Hargrove growled, but Reese stepped out, his voice low as he murmured into the mic. Kiana held her breath, praying he'd defy, the older cop praying Pierce would pick up. The drunk stirred, muttering more slurs, but Kiana ignored her, watching the hall. Minutes stretched into eternity, the air thick with tension until Reese returned, his face ashen. "Agent Pierce confirmed it," he said, barely above a whisper. "She's legit. CIA internship, high school outreach. Orders are to release." "Her?" Hargrove's jaw tightened, his fists clenching, but Latrice didn't wait. "Unlock this door now," she snapped, and Reese fumbled with the keys, springing Kiana free. Kiana stumbled into her mom's arms, the cuffs clattering to the floor, her wrists screaming as blood rushed back. Latrice hugged her tight, whispering, "We're going home, baby." Reese handed back her backpack, the badge tucked inside, and Kiana clutched it, relief flooding her. She'd won, she thought, walking out with Latrice, the precinct's glare, fading behind them. The night air hit her face, cool and sharp, washing away the cell's stench. She'd beaten their lie, proven her truth. MSAT, her future, it was still hers. But as they reached the parking lot, Hargrove's voice slithered after her, low and venomous. "This ain't over, princess." He stood by the precinct steps, his silhouette a dark promise against the sodium lights, Tillman smirking beside him. Kiana's stomach dropped, her victory souring. Latrice squeezed her hand, pulling her toward the car, but Kiana couldn't shake the chill. What had she just stepped into? Was this release just the eye of a storm she couldn't see? Let me know. What you think? Drop a comment #1 if you're raging at Hargrove's racism. Hit like if Kiana's fights got you hooked, and subscribe for more of this wild ride. How far will these cops go to bury her? Could her badge be her shield or her noose? Stick around to find out. Kiana Brooks stepped out of the precinct into the muggy Atlanta night, her mom's arm tight around her shoulders, the CIA badge a heavy secret in her backpack. The air buzzed with cicadas and the distant thrum of traffic, a stark contrast to the precinct's sterile chill. Latrice hustled her into their beat-up Honda, its paint chipped from years of scraping by and peeled out of the lot, tires squealing on asphalt. Kiana's wrists throbbed, the welts still raw, but relief pulsed. Through her. She'd walked free, her truth louder than Hargrove's lies. The city lights blurred past, a kaleidoscope of hope until they pulled into their squat apartment complex on Candler Road, its brick walls stained with time and neglect. Inside, Latrice bolted the door, her hands trembling as she yanked the curtains shut. "You sure you're okay, Kai?" she asked, her voice thick with worry, her braids fraying at the edges from a sleepless night. Kiana nodded, sinking onto their threadbare couch, the springs creaking under her weight. "I'm fine, Mama. They had to let me go. The badge checked out." Latrice exhaled, pulling her into another hug, her warmth a shield against the chaos. Kiana let herself believe it was over, that she could sleep, shower, and wake up to her. Robotics homework, MIT still within reach. But dawn broke with a different story. Kiana jolted awake to her phone buzzing like a trapped wasp, notifications piling up in a relentless flood. She rubbed sleep from her eyes, squinting at the screen, and froze. A local news headline screamed across her feed. "Teen Thug Claims. CIA ties in bank robbery bust." Her stomach plummeted, her thumb hovering over the link. The article twisted everything, her arrest painted as a violent clash, her badge dismissed as a desperate ploy, her face plastered beside mugshots of real criminals. She clicked a video embedded in the story, and her breath caught. Grainy footage rolled, time-stamped from last night, showing her on that East Atlanta sidewalk. But it wasn't the truth. The clip, chopped and stitched by a cruel hand, made her look feral. She lunged at Hargrove, her hands flailing, her voice dubbed with a scream that wasn't hers. The real moment, her calm compliance, the planted wallet, vanished, replaced by this lie. Hargrove's voice narrated, smooth and smug. "She resisted, assaulted us, typical behavior." Tillman chimed in, "Found stolen goods on her, dangerous kid." Kiana's chest tightened, her fingers shaking as she scrolled the comments. "Black liar. Lock her up. Fake badge. Fake tears." Each word stabbed deeper, a digital mob baying for her blood. Latrice snatched the phone, her eyes widening as she watched. "This ain't you, Kai. They faked it," she hissed, slamming the device down. Kiana nodded, her throat dry, but the damage was spreading. By noon, TV crews camped outside their building, their cameras glinting like vulture eyes. She peeked through the curtains, heart pounding, as reporters shouted questions that weren't questions. "Why do you fake the badge? How much did you steal?" Neighbors gawked, some whispering, others turning away. Her phone buzzed. "Again?" Carver High's principal, voice clipped. "Kiana, we're suspending you. Safety concerns. Stay home until this blows over." Safety concerns. She'd built robots for their science fair, won debate trophies, and now she was a threat. The day unraveled fast. Protests sparked downtown, folks marching with signs. "Justice. For Kiana." Their chants echoed through news choppers overhead, a flicker of hope in the storm. But then the hate came, swift and vicious. Her social media drowned in slurs, threats, memes of her face behind bars. "Go back to the hood," one read. "CIA don't hire trash," another spat. Kiana's hands shook as she deleted her accounts, the venom seeping into her bones. Latrice unplugged the TV, muttering prayers, but the outside world wouldn't stay out. At dusk, a pickup truck roared past, its horn blaring, and something crashed through her bedroom window. Glass sprayed across her carpet, jagged shards glinting under the streetlight streaming in. Kiana bolted upright from her bed, her heart slamming against her ribs, and stumbled to the wreckage. A brick lay there, heavy and rough, a note taped to its side. She peeled it off with trembling fingers, the paper crinkling as she unfolded it. Scrawled in black marker, "Leave or die." No signature, but she didn't need one. Hargrove's whisper from the precinct, "This ain't over," rang in her ears, a promise now carved in stone. Latrice rushed in, gasping, and yanked her away from the window. "They're monsters," she whispered, dialing 911, but Kiana knew the cops wouldn't help, not these cops. The operator's voice droned through the phone, detached and useless, promising a patrol car that never showed. Kiana sank to the floor, glass crunching under her sneakers, her mind racing. The news, the footage, the brick, it was a coordinated hit, Hargrove and Tillman pulling strings from the shadows. Her suspension was a gut punch. Carver was her lifeline to MIT, her proof she wasn't what they claimed. Now it was gone, and the hate mob grew louder, their voices a chorus of rage she couldn't silence. She clutched her badge, its edges digging into her palm, a reminder of the truth they'd twisted. Latrice boarded up the window with a spare plank, her hammer strikes sharp and furious, but Kiana's thoughts spiraled. She needed allies, someone to fight back with her. Her robotics club group chat lit up, friends outraged, planning a protest at City Hall. "We've got your back, Kai," one typed. She found a flyer online, a grassroots crew, Justice Now, rallying for her tomorrow. Hope flickered, fragile, but real. She could join them, amplify her voice, turn this mess around. Night fell, the apartment quiet save for Latrice's soft snores, and Kiana plotted, her resolve hardening like steel in a forge. But sleep eluded her, the brick's threat looping in her mind. She crept to the living room, peering through a slit, in the curtains. The street looked empty, sodium lights casting long, eerie shadows, until a flicker caught her eye. A figure in a hoodie, too far to identify, tossing something into a dumpster. Her pulse spiked, but before she could react, flames erupted, licking the sky with greedy tongues. The Justice Now headquarters, a storefront 2 blocks down, was burning, its windows shattering in the heat. Sirens wailed, too late, as the blaze swallowed the building whole. Kiana's knees buckled, her breath shallow. She grabbed her phone, pulling up the news livestream. The anchor's voice crackled. "Arson in East Atlanta. Suspected retaliation against protesters." Then the kicker. Police found evidence linking Kiana Brooks to the scene. Her name again smeared across the screen. She hadn't left the house, hadn't touched a match, but there it was, Hargrove's handiwork, framing her for this, too. The footage shifted to him, standing by the fire, his buzz cut glinting under the lights. "She's dangerous," he said, his tone grave. "We tried to warn folks." Latrice burst in, eyes wide, the phone's glow reflecting her horror. "They're pinning this on you?" she whispered, clutching Kiana's arm. Kiana nodded, numb, the weight of it crushing her. The protest group scattered, their base ash, her allies silenced. Her suspension tightened its grip. MIT's admissions office would see this, her scholarship dangling by a thread. Hargrove hadn't just struck back, he'd torched her world, and this was only the beginning. She stared at the flickering flames on the screen, her fists clenching. How much more could they take from her? And what would they burn next? Kiana Brooks woke to the sound of splintering wood, the apartment door crashing inward under a battering ram's force. She jolted upright on the couch, her heart slamming against her ribs, the pre-dawn gloom shattered by flashlight beams slicing. Through the room, Latrice screamed, stumbling from her bedroom in a frayed robe, as 6 officers stormed in, their boots pounding the floorboards. Officer Tillman led the pack, his broad frame filling the doorway, his steel-grey eyes locked on. Kiana with a predator's glee. "You're under arrest, Brooks," he bellowed, yanking her off the couch by her arm, his grip bruising her skin through her thin T-shirt. "Arson. That fire last night? All you." Kiana's legs buckled, her mind reeling from sleep to terror. In seconds. "I didn't do it," she shouted, twisting against him. But he wrenched her arms behind her back, snapping cuffs on with a vicious twist that reopened her wrist welts. Blood seeped anew, staining her sleeves, as he shoved her toward the door. Latrice lunged forward, her braids swinging, her voice raw. "She was here all night. You can't take her again." An officer blocked her, a wall of Kevlar and menace, while Tillman smirked, dragging Kiana outside. The night air hit her face, thick with humidity, and the acrid tang of smoke still lingering from the torched Justice Now HQ. Squad cars ringed the complex, their lights painting the cracked parking. Lot in strobing red and blue, neighbors peeked from windows, silhouettes against drawn curtains, too scared to step out. Kiana's sneakers scraped the pavement as Tillman hurled her into a cruiser's back seat, the door slamming with a finality that echoed in her bones. She glimpsed Hargrove by another car, his buzz cut glinting under a street lamp, his sneer a silent promise of worse to come. The engine roared and they peeled out, leaving Latrice's cries fading into the distance. Kiana's chest heaved, her breath shallow as the precinct loomed ahead once more. How could they pin this on her so fast? At the station, they marched her to an interrogation room, its walls stained with years of despair. Tillman uncuffed her, shoving her into a chair, her wrists screaming as she rubbed them. Hargrove slid a folder across the table, flipping it open to reveal a glossy photo. A charred gas can, its surface smeared with fingerprints. "Yours," he said, tapping the image, his voice dripping with triumph. "Found it at the scene. You thought you'd burn out your little buddies, huh?" Kiana stared, her stomach plummeting. She'd never touched a gas can, never left the apartment, but there they were, her prints somehow, impossibly. "That's fake," she spat, her voice trembling but fierce. "You planted it, just like the wallet. I was home, asleep." Hargrove leaned in, his coffee breath hot on her face. "Keep lying, princess, nobody's buying it." Tillman paced behind her, cracking his knuckles, the sound a rhythmic threat. They grilled her for hours, questions looping like a trap. "Where'd you get the gas? Who helped you? Why'd you hate those protesters?" Kiana stuck to her truth. Home, asleep, innocent. But their laughter drowned her out, a wall of disbelief she couldn't breach. Her badge, her alibi, her life meant nothing to them. Latrice called Mr. Vance, a wiry lawyer with graying hair and a quiet fire, who barged into the precinct by noon, his briefcase thumping the desk. "You've got no case," he snapped, glaring at Hargrove. "She's got an alibi and I'll prove it." He dug up Carver High's security footage, a grainy feed showing Kiana entering her apartment at 7 the previous night, time-stamped hours before the fire. Hargrove scoffed, but Vance wasn't done. He'd tracked down Agent Pierce, her CIA liaison, who arrived in a crisp suit, his dark eyes scanning the room with calm authority. "Kiana's in our program," Pierce said, his voice steady. "Her. Badge is real, she's no arsonist." The evidence piled up. The footage, Pierce's testimony, a neighbor's shaky statement about seeing cops near the fire. Tillman's smirk faded, Hargrove's fists clenched, but the precinct captain, a grizzled man with a permanent scowl, had no choice. "Cut her loose," he growled, and Kiana's cuffs clattered to the floor. She stumbled out, Pierce nodding. Silently as he left, Vance guiding her to Latrice's waiting arms. Her mum hugged her tight, tears soaking Kiana's shirt, the relief palpable. "It's over, baby," Latrice whispered, and Kiana let herself believe it, the precinct shrinking, in the rear view as they drove home. But freedom came with a shadow. By dusk, squad cars prowled their street, slow and deliberate, their engines a low growl. Kiana peeked from the boarded-up window, her pulse spiking as Hargrove leaned out one, shouting, "Thieving black trash!" Tillman followed in another, bellowing, "We see you, girl." The slurs ricocheted off the brick walls, a daily gauntlet that turned her walks to the mailbox into a war zone. Neighbors turned away, their doors locking with soft clicks, fear or shame keeping them silent. Her phone buzzed with an email from MIT. "We're monitoring your situation, scholarship under review." Her stomach knotted. Her future dangled by a thread. She found refuge with Justice Now survivors, meeting in a cramped church basement, their faces etched with fury and resolve. "We're still with you," a woman named Shay said, her dreads tied back, her voice firm. They planned a new rally, a defiance against the ashes, and Kiana clung to their strength, her own hardening. Night fell, the apartment quiet save for Jamal, her 12-year-old brother, humming in his room. She cooked dinner, mac and cheese, his favorite, smiling as he scarfed it down, his gap-toothed grin a flicker of normalcy. "You're a hero, Kai," he said, and she ruffled his hair, her heart swelling. But at midnight a crash shattered the peace. Kiana bolted to Jamal's room, finding his window gaping, curtains flapping in the breeze, his bed empty. Her knees buckled, a scream clawing up her throat as she spotted a note taped to the sill, scrawled in jagged ink. "Drop the fight or he's dead." Tillman's handwriting. She'd seen it on her arrest papers, etched into her brain like a brand. Latrice ran in, gasping, her hands flying to her mouth. Kiana's vision blurred, tears burning as she clutched the note, the words, "a knife to her gut." Her victory, her release, it was a mirage. Tillman had struck back harder, crueler, snatching the one thing she'd die to protect. She sank to the floor, Jamal's toy robot staring at her from his desk, its plastic eyes hollow. Latrice dialed, 911, her voice cracking, but Kiana knew the cops wouldn't help, not Hargrove's crew. Her badge had saved her twice, but now it was useless, a trinket against a monster who'd taken her brother. Her fists clenched, nails biting her palms. She'd find him no matter what. But how? Where had Tillman hidden him? And what would he demand next? Drop a comment number 1 if you're furious these cops framed Kiana again. Hit like if her fights got your heart racing, and subscribe to see her next move. Can she outsmart Tillman and save Jamal? Will her badge be enough, or is it just fuel for their fire? Stay tuned, because this storm's about to break wide open. Kiana Brooks knelt on the floor of Jamal's room, the note's jagged words searing her vision. Drop the fight or he's dead. Her brother's toy robot sat silent on his desk, its plastic shell mocking her helplessness. Latrice sobbed, into the phone begging 911 for help, but Kiana's ears rang with the truth. The cops wouldn't save him, not Tillman's crew, not Hargrove's puppets. Her fists clenched, nails carving crescents into her palms, as rage swallowed her fear. She'd built machines that could think, she could find him, she had to. The clock above the stove blinked 12:15, each tick a lash against her spine. She grabbed her backpack, the CIA badge glinting as she unzipped a hidden pocket. Inside lay tools from last summer's internship, a signal tracker, a pocket drone, a frequency jammer, gadgets she'd mastered under Agent Pierce's tutelage. Her hands shook as she powered up the tracker, its screen glowing green, syncing to Jamal's cheap phone, the one she'd fixed for him last month. A faint ping pulsed, 3 miles northwest, near the old industrial sprawl by the Chattahoochee River. "He's there," she whispered, shoving the gear into her bag. Latrice grabbed her arm, eyes wild. "Kai, you can't go alone." But Kiana pulled free, her voice steel. "I'm getting him back, Mama." She slipped out the back, hoodie up, the night thick with mist rolling off the river. The tracker led her through East Atlanta's fringes, past shuttered storefronts and weedy lots, her sneakers silent on cracked pavement. Sirens wailed in the distance, useless noise from a system that had failed her. The signal sharpened near a derelict warehouse, its rusted walls sagging under vines, windows black as empty sockets. Kiana crouched behind a dumpster, its stench of rot choking her, and launched the drone. Its hum was a whisper as it soared, feeding grainy footage to her phone. 2 goons in ski masks patrolled the perimeter, rifles slung over their shoulders. Tillman's crew. Her pulse hammered, but she focused, years of robotics club kicking in. She hacked the warehouse's ancient security grid with the jammer, frying its cameras in a burst of static. The guards cursed, splitting up to check the breach, and Kiana darted through a side door, its hinges groaning. Inside, the air was dank, heavy with mold and gasoline fumes. Crates loomed in shadows, their splintered edges catching the faint moonlight spilling through a skylight. She crept forward, the tracker's beep guiding her to a rusted stairwell descending into darkness. Was Jamal down there? Alive? The basement reeked of damp earth, a single bulb swaying from a cord, casting jittery light over a chair in the center. Jamal sat bound to it, duct tape gagging his mouth, his small frame trembling. His eyes widened as he saw her, muffled cries breaking her heart. Tillman loomed beside him, his broad back turned, a pistol dangling from his hand as he barked into a phone. "She'll cave, Hargrove. We've got the kid." Kiana's blood boiled, her fingers tightening on the drone's remote. She edged closer, hiding behind a stack of barrels, and sent the drone buzzing at Tillman's head. He swatted at it, roaring, "What the hell?" Kiana seized the moment, sprinting to Jamal, her pocket knife slashing through the ropes. His wrists bled raw from struggling, but she ripped the tape off his mouth, his gasp echoing as she hauled him up. Tillman spun, his gun snapping toward them, but she yanked Jamal behind the barrels as a shot rang out, splintering wood inches from her face. "Run!" she hissed, shoving him toward the stairs. Footsteps thundered above. Tillman's goons, alerted by the blast. Kiana tossed the jammer, its pulse frying their radios, buying seconds. They bolted up the steps, bullets pinging off metal railings, the air thick with gunpowder and her own ragged breaths. Jamal stumbled, his legs shaky, but she dragged him onward, her arm around his waist. The skylight glowed ahead, a jagged exit. She boosted him up, glass cutting her palms as she smashed it wider, then hauled herself through. They tumbled onto the roof, gravel biting her knees, the river's glint a lifeline below. Tillman's bellows chased them, his bulk crashing through the door below, but Kiana spotted a fire escape, rusted but intact. "Down now," she ordered, and they slid, metal groaning under their weight. The ground hit hard, jarring her spine, but she pulled Jamal into the shadows, sprinting toward a thicket by the riverbank. Shots cracked behind them, tearing through leaves, Tillman's curses fading as they wove through trees. Her drone buzzed. Overhead, a decoy she'd programmed to loop back, drawing the goons west. Sirens screamed closer. Not Hargrove's crew, but real responders, lights flashing through the mist. Kiana collapsed against a trunk, Jamal clinging to her, his sobs soaking her hoodie. "I knew you'd come, Kai," he whispered, and she hugged him tight, her own tears burning. They staggered home at dawn, Latrice's cries of relief echoing as she crushed them both in her arms. News vans swarmed the street by noon, cameras rolling as Justice Now survivors rallied outside, their signs blazing. "Free Kiana! Stop the lies!" The mayor, a slick man in a pinstripe suit, faced the mics, promising a full investigation into Tillman's rogue actions. Hargrove's suspension hit the wires, his badge yanked pending review, and Kiana let herself breathe. Jamal was safe, the rally roared, justice seemed close. She sank onto the couch, exhaustion pulling her under, a fragile hope blooming. But the victory soured fast. Cops didn't vanish, they multiplied, their cruisers circling like sharks, loudspeakers blaring, "Gang leader Brooks on the loose." The label stuck, plastered across headlines. Her face morphed into a mugshot menace. MIT's dean called, voice tight. "We're delaying your enrollment. Too much heat." Her scholarship teetered, her robotics dreams slipping through her fingers. Neighbors spat at her shadow, their whispers venomous. "She's trouble." Kiana's chest ached, the rally's cheers drowned by a tide of hate she couldn't stem. Night fell, Latrice cooking to keep sane, Jamal sketching robots to forget. Kiana stepped outside, needing air, her hoodie up against the chill. The Honda sat in its spot, dented but hers, a tether to normalcy. She leaned against it, staring at the stars, until a flicker caught her eye. A spark under the chassis. Her gut screamed, years of tinkering flashing warning lights. She dove back, yelling, "Mama, get down!" as the car erupted, a fireball swallowing the lot, hurling her into the grass. Shrapnel rained, singeing her hair, the blast's roar deafening. Her Latrice and Jamal burst out, unharmed but sobbing as flames devoured the Honda's husk. Sirens wailed, too late again, and Kiana staggered up, her ears ringing, her hands scraped raw. News choppers buzzed overhead, their feeds already spinning. Black Radical Bomb's own car. Hargrove's voice cut through, a clip from earlier. "Told you she's unhinged." He wasn't suspended enough to stop this, his reach snaking from the sidelines. Kiana's knees shook, the truth sinking in. Tillman took Jamal, but Hargrove lit this fuse. Her family, her future, everything. Burned, and they'd pinned it on her again. Kiana Brooks sprawled on the scorched grass, her ears ringing from the car bomb's blast. The night sky a swirl of smoke and chopper blades. Flames devoured the Honda's twisted frame, their heat licking her face as she scrambled to her feet. Her hands scraped bloody from the fall. Latrice and Jamal stumbled from the apartment, their silhouettes staggering through the haze, coughing as they reached her. "Mama!" Kiana screamed, lunging forward, her heart lurching as Latrice collapsed, her robe singed, her breath shallow. Jamal clung to her, his small hands trembling, tears streaking his soot-streaked cheeks. Sirens wailed closer, red lights, piercing the dark, but Kiana knew Hargrove's shadow loomed behind this. Paramedics swarmed, their voices sharp as they loaded Latrice onto a stretcher, an oxygen mask pressed to her face. "Smoke inhalation, possible burns," one barked, and Kiana followed, her legs numb, Jamal's hand gripped in hers. The ambulance ride blurred, a cacophony of beeps and radio chatter, her mom's chest rising faintly under the blanket. At EAO Grady Memorial, doctors whisked Latrice away, leaving Kiana and Jamal in a sterile waiting room, its fluorescent buzz drilling into her skull. Hours crawled by, her phone buzzing with news alerts. Kiana Brooks bombs family car. Hargrove's. Smug clip looped. She's a radical, plain and simple. Her fists clenched, nails biting her palms. She hadn't touched a bomb, but they'd made her the villain again. Dawn broke, grey and heavy, when a nurse emerged, her scrubs crisp. "She's stable," she said, and Kiana exhaled, a sob choking her throat. Latrice lay in a hospital bed, tubes snaking from her arms, her eyes fluttering open as Kiana rushed to her side. "Kai, you okay?" she rasped, her voice frail but fierce. Kiana nodded, tears spilling, and hugged her gently, Jamal curling beside them. "They won't break us, Mama," she whispered, resolve hardening like iron. Hargrove had nearly killed her mum. This wasn't just a fight for her name anymore. It was war. Mr. Vance arrived, his suit rumpled from a sleepless night, his grey eyes blazing. "We're suing," he said, slamming a legal pad on the table. "Wrongful arrest, arson frame-up, now this, the Atlanta PD's done." Kiana agreed, her voice steady despite the ache in her chest. They filed that day, a civil suit naming Hargrove, Tillman and the department, demanding millions and accountability. Justice now rallied outside the courthouse, their chants shaking the steps. "No more lies, free Kiana." News vans ate it up, cameras flashing as Vance declared, "She's a hero, not a criminal." By dusk, a judge ordered Hargrove's arrest. His suspension upgraded to cuffs, and Kiana felt a flicker of triumph. She didn't stop there. Back home, the apartment reeking of smoke, she booted her laptop, her CIA training kicking in. She hacked into the precinct's unsecured servers, her fingers flying over keys, cracking passwords with algorithms she'd built for fun. Files spilled. Open. Emails, memos, a racist cop ring stretching beyond Hargrove and Tillman. Code words like cleanup and targets littered chats. Black teens listed like prey. Her breath caught. One thread tied Hargrove to the bomb. A burner phone pinging near their lot hours before. She leaked it all to a local blog, Atlanta Truth, and it went viral, headlines screaming, "Cop ring exposed by teen genius." The nation roared, protests swelling, and Kiana thought she'd won. Hargrove's mugshot hit the news, his buzz cut stark under jail lights, and the ring's bust trended coast to coast. Kiana Brooks, whistleblower hero, one anchor dubbed her, and her chest swelled, a fragile hope blooming. Latrice smiled from her hospital bed, discharged with a clean bill, her strength returning. Jamal drew robots again, his laughter a bomb. Kiana slept that night, the first time in days, dreaming of MIT's labs, her badge gleaming. Maybe justice wasn't a myth, maybe she'd clawed it free. But the system struck back. The DA, a slick man named Carver with ties to Hargrove's precinct, buried her leaks, dismissing them as unverified. Evidence vanished, server logs wiped, witnesses silent. The lawsuit stalled, jurors empaneled for a hearing, but death threats flooded their phones. "Drop it or bleed." One quit, sobbing on live TV, a cross burned on her lawn. Kiana's stomach knotted. The ring wasn't dead, it was coiled, waiting. News spun her as a troublemaker. Her heroism flipped to hacker menace. Her allies wavered, Justice Now's numbers thinning, fear choking their fire. Night fell, the apartment quiet, Latrice cooking collards to reclaim normalcy. Kiana sat at the table, her laptop dark, her badge heavy in her pocket. Jamal hummed in his room, safe for now, but the air felt thick, electric with dread. A thud rattled the front door and she froze, her pulse spiking. Latrice dropped a spoon, grease splattering as glass shattered, the living room window exploding inward. Kiana dove for cover, shards raining as Tillman stormed through, a shotgun cocked in his meaty fists. His eyes gleamed, wild and unhinged, his voice a roar. "You'll pay in blood, girl." She scrambled back, her hips slamming the couch, glass crunching under her sneakers. Latrice screamed, yanking Jamal from his room, his toy robot clattering to the floor. Tillman swung the barrel, his bulk filling the space, his breath ragged. "Thought you could ruin us?" he snarled, racking. The slide with a metallic clack. Kiana's mind raced. Her badge, her hacks, her fight had pushed him here free despite the chaos, a beast unleashed. She lunged for her backpack, fumbling for the jammer, but Tillman's boot caught her ribs, hurling her against the wall. Pain flared, her vision swimming as he loomed closer, the gun's muzzle a black void. Latrice grabbed a skillet, swinging it at his head, but he batted it away, the clang echoing as she fell. Jamal wailed, and Kiana surged up, adrenaline flooding her veins. She tackled his legs, toppling him, the shotgun skidding across the floor. He roared, fists flailing, but she rolled free, snatching her phone. Her thumb hit the alarm app, a CIA trick Pierce had taught her, its wail piercing the night. Tillman froze, then bolted, crashing through the ruined window as sirens screamed nearby. Not Hargrove's crew, but SWAT, real responders, drawn by the signal. Kiana collapsed, her ribs throbbing, Latrice pulling her and Jamal close. The apartment was a war zone, glass and grease staining the rug, but they were alive. Police flooded in, their boots crunching, Tillman's trail vanishing into the dark. Kiana's chest heaved, her false victory ashes in her mouth. Hargrove was jailed. The Tew. Ring exposed, but Tillman's attack proved the fight wasn't over. How deep did this rot go, and who'd strike next? Drop a comment number 1. If you're stunned the system, let Tillman loose. Hit like if Kiana's guts have you cheering, and subscribe for the next brutal twist. Can she dodge another bullet, or will this shotgun blast be her last stand? Picture this, a girl with a badge cornered by hate. What's her next play? Stay locked in because this fire's raging hotter than ever. Kiana Brooks sprawled on the apartment floor, her ribs screaming from Tillman's kick, glass shards glinting like teeth around her. The shotgun lay inches away, its barrel a dark promise, as Tillman loomed, his broad frame heaving with rage. Latrice clutched Jamal behind the couch, her skillet useless on the rug, her eyes wide with terror. Kiana's phone pulsed in her hand, the CIA alarm app blaring its piercing wail, a lifeline she'd rigged last summer under Agent Pierce's watchful eye. Tillman flinched, his steel-gray gaze darting to the shattered window, the sound slicing through his fury. She'd trapped him, and he knew it. He lunged for the gun, his boots crunching glass, but Kiana rolled, her fingers snagging her backpack. She yanked out the frequency jammer, its sleek casing cool against her palm, and thumbed it on. A static pulse erupted, frying his earpiece, his curses garbling as he clutched his head. Sirens swelled outside, not Hargrove's cronies, but SWAT, their tires screeching on Candler Road. Tillman staggered, his shotgun swinging wild, and Kiana dove, shoving Jamal and Latrice toward the kitchen. "Stay down!" she hissed, her voice raw as red dots danced through the room, sniper lasers locking on. The front wall exploded inward, SWAT breaching with a thunderclap, their shouts a deafening roar. "Drop it! Now!" Tillman spun, firing blind the blast, shredding the couch into feathers and foam. Kiana ducked, her ears ringing as a SWAT officer tackled him, his bulk crashing to the floor. Steel cuffs snapped on, his bellows muffled by the chaos, and they hauled him out, blood streaking his face from a shattered nose. Kiana crawled to Latrice and Jamal, their arms tangling in a desperate knot, her ribs throbbing, but her pulse steadying. They'd survived, barely. Police swept the wreckage, their flashlights carving paths through the haze. Kiana handed over her phone, the alarm's log time-stamped, proof she'd called for help, not havoc. Latrice recounted Tillman's break-in, her voice shaking but firm, Jamal nodding through sobs. The lead officer, a grizzled woman with a buzzcut, scowled at the scene. "He's done," she muttered, and Kiana let herself hope the apartment's ruin a small price for his cage. Dawn crept in, grey and heavy, as they patched her ribs with gauze, the medic's hands gentle against her bruises. She didn't rest. Back at the hospital with Latrice and Jamal, safe in a guarded room, Kiana uploaded her hacked files, the precinct's racist ring, Hargrove's bomb plot, to every platform she could hit. Atlanta Truth broke it first, her leaks spreading. Like wildfire, hashtags erupting. Kiana fights back, expose the ring. Clips of Tillman's arrest leaked too, shaky phone footage from a neighbor, his shotgun glinting as SWAT swarmed. By noon, national news ran it non-stop, pundits raging, protests flaring from Atlanta to LA. Teen hero survives cop assault, One headline blared, and Kiana's chest swelled, a battered pride rising through the pain. MIT called that afternoon, the dean's voice softer now. "Your scholarship's reinstated, Kiana. We see the truth." She exhaled, tears pricking. Her eyes, the labs she'd dreamed of shimmering closer. Latrice squeezed her hand, Jamal grinned, and for a moment the hospital's antiseptic sting faded. The evidence was out, Tillman was locked, Hargrove jailed. Justice felt tangible, AE. Victory she'd clawed from the ashes. She posted a selfie, her bandaged ribs peeking from her shirt, captioned, "Still standing." It hit 1 million views by dusk, her name a beacon for the hunted. But the glow dimmed fast. A grand jury convened, all white, their faces stone, as they sifted her case. Vance warned her, his voice low, "They're stacked against us." Days later, the verdict dropped like a guillotine, insufficient proof to indict. Tillman's break-in, the bomb, the ring, all dismissed, the DA's buried files shielding them. News spun it quick. No charges for Hero Teen's attackers. Kiana's stomach churned, her viral triumph souring. The jury's phones had buzzed with threats, crosses on lawns, calls in the night, and they'd buckled, fear trumping facts. Hargrove's crew still ruled from the shadows. She sat in the hospital. Latrice discharged, Jamal sketching beside her when the next blow landed. A judge's ruling hit the wires. Hargrove released on a technicality, some clerk's typo in his warrant. Kiana's phone slipped, clattering. To the tile, her breath shallow. He walked free that night, news cams catching his buzz cut under precinct lights, his sneer wider than ever. "She'll pay," he said, his voice a blade through the mic. "Got friends who'll finish this." Her skin prickled. He wasn't alone. He'd built something worse, a militia festering in Atlanta's underbelly, primed to hunt her down. Latrice pulled her close, her arms a frail shield, but Kiana's mind raced. The apartment was a crime scene, unlivable, their car ash. They bunked in a motel, its neon sign buzzing outside a cracked window. She stared at her badge, its eagle emblem dull under the flickering bulb. It had saved her, exposed them, but it couldn't stop this. Tillman was caged, Hargrove loose, and the system shrugged, her leaks a scream into a void. Jamal slept, his breath soft, Latrice's prayers a murmur. But Kiana stayed awake, her ribs aching, her resolve a thin thread. Hargrove's friends were coming, and she'd face them alone. Kiana Brooks hunched in the motel room. The neon signs buzz a relentless drone through the cracked window, her badge cold in her hand. Hargrove's release hit her like a punch, his televised threat. "Friends who'll finish this," looping in her skull. Latrice slept fitfully on the sagging bed, Jamal curled beside her, his breath soft against the hum of a city turning hostile. Kiana's ribs ached, her bandages tight, but sleep wouldn't come. The grand jury's betrayal had unshackled a monster, and Atlanta trembled under its shadow. She scrolled her phone, news feeds alight with rumors, armed men, Hargrove's militia, prowling the streets. Midnight cracked with chaos. Sirens erupted, a chorus of wails slicing the night, and Kiana peered out, her pulse spiking. Flames danced 2 blocks away, licking the sky above a black-owned barbershop she'd passed 100 times. Tires screeched, shouts echoed, and her phone buzzed with alerts. Arson spree targets East Atlanta. She swiped to a live stream, her breath catching as masked figures torched a soul food joint, their rifles glinting under streetlights. A voice barked through the feed, Hargrove's South Georgia drawl unmistakable. "She's next." Kiana's stomach knotted. They weren't just striking, they were hunting her. Latrice jolted awake, her eyes wide. "Kai, what's happening?" Kiana grabbed her backpack, shoving in her CIA gear. "They're coming for us, Mama. We've got to move." Jamal stirred, bleary-eyed, as she hustled them out, the motel's stale air swapped for the tang of smoke and panic. The streets churned with fleeing families, their cries drowned by crackling fires. Kiana led them toward a church on flat shoals, its steeple a dim beacon. Justice Now's last safe haven. Her sneakers pounded pavement, Jamal's hand sweaty. In hers, Latrice panting behind. Would they make it before the militia closed in? The church doors creaked open, Shay from Justice Now ushering them in, her dreads tied tight, her face etched with fury. "They're hitting everything black-owned," she whispered, bolting the lock. Survivors huddled inside, 20 strong, their eyes hollow but defiant. Barbers, cooks, mums clutching kids. Flames painted the stained glass windows red. The militia's roars seeping through. Kiana rallied them, her voice steady despite the tremor in her chest. "We fight back. They want me, but they won't break us." Shay nodded, passing out phones, their screens glowing with plans. Record, spread, survive. Kiana dialed Agent Pierce, her CIA lifeline, her words tumbling fast. "Hargrove's got a militia. They're burning Atlanta. I need help." Pierce's voice cut through, calm but urgent. "Stay put. Drones are inbound." She hung up, her hands shaking as she launched her own drone from a pew, its hum lost in the chaos outside. Footage streamed to her phone. Masked men smashing windows, torching a daycare, their rifles spitting sparks. Hargrove strode among them, his buzz cut stark under a flickering street lamp, directing the carnage. Her stomach churned. He'd turned her city into a battlefield. The church trembled, glass rattling as a Molotov cocktail crashed against its wall, flames licking the brick. Survivors screamed, kids wailing, but Kiana kept filming, her drone weaving through smoke. Pierce's promise held. CIA drones buzzed in, their sleek frames cutting the sky, capturing every torch, every shot. The feed hit Atlanta Truth, live and unfiltered, millions watching as Hargrove's militia raged. Feds stormed the streets hours later, their choppers thundering, agents in black vests swarming the arsonists. Hargrove bolted, his crew scattering like rats, but drones tracked him to a warehouse, his cuffs snapping on by dawn. Kiana exhaled, the church's air thick with sweat and relief, survivors cheering as news broke. Feds bust militia, Hargrove rearrested. Pierce called, his tone clipped. "You're safe for now, we've got him." She sank against a pew, Latrice hugging her tight, Jamal's grin a flicker of light. The fires died out, Atlanta smoldering but standing, and Kiana felt a fragile win. Her drone footage trended globally, her name a rallying cry again. Maybe this was it. Hargrove caged, the militia broken, her fight tipping the scales. But the dawn soured. Feds downplayed it all. Their press conference a sterile lie. Civil unrest contained, no racial motive. Kiana's jaw dropped, her phone slipping as they erased the hate she'd filmed. Justice Now allies faced cuffs, obstructing peace. Their protests branded riots. Shay vanished into a paddy wagon, her dreads swinging as she yelled, "Keep fighting, Kai!" Kiana's chest tightened, her victory hollowed out, her people punished for her stand. The motel loomed, a temporary refuge, but Hargrove's reach lingered, a ghost in the system. Graduation day crept up. Carver High's ceremony moved to a civic center after threats. Kiana donned her cap and gown, her ribs healed but her spirit bruised, Latrice beaming beside her. She'd earned this, 4.0, MIT-bound, a survivor. The crowd cheered as she crossed the stage, her diploma a hard-won prize, but unease gnawed her. She scanned the seats mid-speech, her eyes catching a glint under a chair, wires, a timer, a bomb. Tillman's work, she knew it, his escape from custody a rumor she'd ignored. "Get out!" she yelled, vaulting off stage, shoving grads and parents toward exits. The blast ripped through seconds later, a fireball shredding the hall, hurling Kiana into a wall. Her ears rang, debris raining, but she'd cleared enough. The death toll stayed low, a miracle amid screams. She staggered up, coughing dust, her gown torn as cops swarmed. Cameras caught Tillman's shadow fleeing, his broad frame unmistakable, and he was nabbed blocks away, cuffs snapping tight. News hailed her. "Teen saves hundreds," but Kiana's knees shook, the cost sinking in. Hargrove's militia, Tillman's bomb, they'd never stop. Drop a comment #1 if you're raging at the feds whitewashing this hate. Hit like if Kiana's drone hustle blew your mind, and subscribe to catch her next stand. Can she dodge Tillman's next strike, or is her graduation just the start of his revenge? Imagine this. A girl with a badge, facing a bomb. Where does she run when the world's still burning? Stick around, because this fight's about to explode bigger than ever. Kiana Brooks stood on the Civic Center stage, her graduation gown swishing around her knees, the weight of her diploma a fragile triumph in her hand. The crowd roared, a sea of caps and clapping hands, Latrice beaming from the front row, Jamal waving a handmade sign, "Kai's the best." Her ribs had healed, her spirit patched together after weeks of fire and fear, and this moment, Carver High's class of 2025, felt like a lifeline. She stepped to the podium, her voice steady as she began her speech, words about resilience she'd lived, not just read. But mid-sentence, her eye snagged on a glint beneath a chair, wires curling like snakes, a red timer ticking down from 30 seconds. Her heart slammed against her chest, Tillman's shadow flashing in her mind. He'd escaped custody, a whisper she'd dismissed, and now this. "Get out!" she yelled, vaulting off stage, her gown flapping as she shoved grads toward the exits. "Bomb, run!" Panic erupted, screams piercing the air as she grabbed Jamal, yanking him from his seat, Latrice stumbling behind. She barreled through the crowd, herding parents and teachers, her sneakers slipping on polished wood. 20 seconds. She kicked open a side door, ushering dozens out, her voice raw. "Move! Now!" 10 seconds. She spun back for stragglers, spotting a kid frozen by the stage, and dragged him free as the timer hit 0. The blast tore through, a fireball swallowing the hall, hurling Kiana into a wall with a crack that stole her breath. Her ears rang, debris pelting her back, the gown ripping as she hit the floor. Smoke choked her lungs, screams echoing through the haze, but she'd cleared enough. Hundreds spilled into the parking lot, alive. She staggered up, coughing. Her palms scraped raw on shattered glass and scanned for Latrice and Jamal. They stumbled from the crowd, soot-streaked but whole, rushing to her side. Latrice's arms crushed her, Jamal's sobs soaking her shoulder, and Kiana clung back, her legs trembling under the weight of near death. Cops swarmed, their boots pounding asphalt, flashlights carving through the dust. News choppers buzzed overhead, their feeds live as paramedics triaged the chaos. 20 injured, no deaths, a miracle pinned to Kiana's scream. A grainy security clip hit the wires. Tillman's broad frame caught planting the bomb, his ski, mask slipping as he fled. Feds nabbed him blocks away, tires squealing, cuffs snapping tight on his wrists. His mugshot flashed nationwide, steel grey eyes glaring, and Kiana exhaled, a shaky relief flooding her. She'd saved them, stopped him. Maybe this was the end. The nation mourned with her, headlines blazing, "Teen hero thwarts graduation bombing." Clips of her sprinting off stage looped, her torn gown a symbol of grit, and strangers flooded. Her inbox with praise. "You're a legend, Kiana." Latrice cried on TV, Jamal grinning beside her, as Atlanta draped her in laurels. She graduated in a hospital gown instead, her diploma handed over by a beaming principal, the Civic Center's ruins a backdrop to her win. Tillman was locked tight, Hargrove still caged, and for a fleeting moment Kiana believed she'd turned the tide, her badge a shield at last. But the praise twisted fast. Talking heads pivoted, their voices oily with doubt. Did she stage it? "For fame," a pundit sneered. "Convenient how she's always the hero." Blogs ran wild. Kiana Brooks, attention seeker or savior? Her stomach churned, the racism seeping through every word. Her blackness a crime, her courage a con. Cops chimed in, anonymous quotes flooding X. "She's playing victim, milking this." The Civic Center's wreckage became a prop, her sprint, a stunt, and Kiana's chest tightened, the nation's grief curdling into scorn. She'd saved lives, but they'd rather burn her than believe her. Latrice unplugged the TV, her hands shaking, but the hate rolled on. Kiana holed up in the motel, its peeling walls closing in, Jamal sketching to block it out. She scrolled her phone, each slur a needle under her skin, until a new alert stopped her cold. Leaked CIA file exposes teen traitor. Her breath caught, her badge slipping from her fingers as she clicked. Pages spilled online. Her internship records, redacted missions, Pierce's notes, stamped with her name, twisted to paint her a spy against America. Hargrove's grin flashed in her mind. He'd done this from jail, his reach snaking through bars to rip her apart. The file hit hate sites like gasoline on a fire, racists nationwide baying for her blood. CIA sellout, one post raged. Black traitor needs to pay, another vowed. Kiana's motel window rattled, a brick narrowly missing, and she yanked the curtains shut, her pulse racing. Jamal whimpered, Latrice praying aloud. But the threats multiplied. Emails, calls, a flood she couldn't stem. News ran it coast to coast, her face a target, her badge a bullseye. Hargrove's leak wasn't just revenge, it was a call to arms. And America answered with venom she'd never outrun. She sank to the floor, her torn gown crumpled beside her, the diploma mocking her from the table. Tillman was caged, but Hargrove's hate had wings, soaring beyond Atlanta to every corner of a nation primed to despise her. Her MIT dreams flickered, her family's safety a thread, and Kiana clutched her badge, its eagle emblem a hollow promise. She'd stopped a bomb, saved lives, but they'd turned her into prey again. How much more could they take, and who'd hunt her next? Kiana Brooks hunched in the motel's dim corner, her graduation gown a tattered heap beside her, the CIA badge a cold weight in her lap. Hargrove's leaked file burned across her phone screen, her name splashed on hate sites like blood in shark-infested waters. Kiana Brooks, CIA traitor, trended, posts multiplying with venom. Hunt her down, make her pay. Her inbox overflowed with threats, each ping a jolt to her spine, photos of her face X'd out, addresses too close to home. She slammed the device shut, her hands trembling, but the motel's thin walls couldn't block the world's roar. Latrice paced, her prayers a frantic hum, Jamal sketching robots to drown his fear. Dawn broke with a crack, gunfire splitting the air, a bullet shattering the motel window. Glass sprayed, Kiana diving to the floor, dragging Jamal with her as Latrice screamed. Another shot punched the wall, plaster dust raining, and Kiana's heart slammed against her ribs. Snipers. Hargrove's leak had unleashed them, racists nationwide taking aim. She crawled to her backpack, snagging her signal tracker, its green pulse pinging two shooters on the roof across the street. "Stay low," she hissed, shoving Latrice behind the bed, her mind racing. They weren't safe here. Not anymore. She dialed Agent Pierce, her voice a rasp. "Snipers, Pierce, they've got my motel." His reply came sharp. "Get out, safe house now, I'm sending a team." Kiana grabbed Jamal and Latrice, her sneakers crunching glass as they bolted through the back, dodging a third shot that splintered the doorframe. A black SUV screeched up, Pierce's men in tactical vests piling out, their rifles barking at the roof. Bullets pinged off metal, the snipers scattering, and Kiana hustled her family inside, the vehicle peeling out as smoke curled from the motel's ruin. Her chest heaved, her badge clutched tight, her lifeline had become a target. The safe house, crouched in rural Georgia, a nondescript cabin ringed by pines, its windows dark. Pierce met them, his suit crisp despite the hour, his dark eyes scanning her cuts. "You're secure here," he said, ushering them in. Latrice sank onto a cot, Jamal clinging to her, while Kiana followed Pierce to a makeshift ops room. Monitors, cables, a tech hub humming with purpose. "Hargrove's network's bigger than we thought," he said, sliding her a laptop. "Decode." "You're the best I've got." She nodded, her fingers itching to fight back, and cracked into the leaked files, her CIA training igniting. Hours bled into days, her screen a maze of encrypted chats and burner pings. She traced Hargrove's, a militia, hundreds strong, spanning states, their code words chilling. "Cleanse the list at target 1, Brooks." Her stomach knotted, but she dug deeper, linking him to a jail server, his orders typed from a smuggled phone. "End her," one read, time-stamped yesterday. Kiana's hands shook, but she fed Pierce coordinates, names, plans for a race war brewing in Atlanta's shadows. Feds raided Hargrove's cell at dawn, their boots storming the prison, seizing his device, his smug grin fading as cuffs tightened anew. News broke. Feds thwart race war plot. Hargrove silenced. Kiana exhaled, the safe house's stale air. Tasting sweeter, Pierce's nod a quiet win. Latrice hugged her, Jamal grinned, and she felt a flicker of safety. Her decoding had caged him again, his voice snuffed out. The snipers were nabbed, their rifles confiscated, and MIT emailed, "You're still ours, Kiana." She slept that night, the first time in weeks, her badge on the nightstand, a shield reclaimed. Maybe she'd outrun the hate, carved a path through the storm. But the reprieve shattered. Politicians took the mic, their suits pressed, their lies smooth. Kiana Brooks, threat to order. They spun her leaks as vigilante chaos, her survival, a public danger, her blackness. The real crime. Her chest tightened, the racism a blade twisting deeper, hero one day, villain the next. Feds pulled back, Pierce's team thinning, their mission complete, a hollow echo. The safe house stayed, but the world outside branded her a pariah, her face a lightning rod for hate she couldn't dodge. The motel owner called next, his voice clipped. "You're evicted." "Too much trouble." Latrice's jaw dropped, Jamal's pencil snapping in his fist, but Kiana knew why. Her name was poison, their home collateral damage. They packed what little remained, the safe house their only roof, its isolation a cage. She scrolled X, the slurs relentless. Traitor spawn. Burn her out. Her badge had exposed Hargrove, saved lives, but it couldn't shield her family from this fallout. The nation cheered her ruin, and she sank into a chair, her resolve fraying like thread. Night fell, the pines whispering outside when tires crunched gravel. Kiana jolted up, her tracker pinging, 5 signals closing fast. Pierce was gone, his team on another op, and her gut screamed, "Tillman's crew." The door crashed open, masked men storming in, their rifles gleaming. Latrice shrieked, shoving Jamal behind her, but a goon grabbed her, his gloved hand clamping her throat. "You're ours now," he snarled, dragging her out as Kiana lunged, her fists swinging. A rifle butt cracked her skull, stars bursting, and she hit the floor, blood pooling under her cheek. Jamal wailed, pinned by another thug, as Latrice's screams faded into the night, the SUV's roar swallowing them. Kiana crawled up, her vision swimming, the note they'd dropped glinting under the lamp. "Surrender or she dies." Tillman's scrawl, she'd know it anywhere, his crew striking from the dark while he rotted in jail. Her head throbbed, her badge useless as Jamal sobbed beside her. Hargrove was silenced, but Tillman's hate lived on, snatching her mom, the one rock she'd clung to. She staggered to her feet, her fight reignited. Latrice was out there, and she'd tear the world apart to get her back. Kiana Brooks staggered to her feet in the safe house, blood dripping from her temple where Tillman's goon had cracked her skull, the note's scrawl burning her vision. "Surrender, or she dies." Jamal sobbed beside her, his small frame shaking. Latrice's scream still echoing as the SUV's roar faded into the pines. Her head throbbed, her ribs ached, but rage swallowed the pain. She'd lost her mum to these monsters, and she'd ripped them apart to get her back. She grabbed her backpack. CIA gadgets spilling out. Tracker, drone, jammer, tools she'd wielded like weapons. "Stay here, Jay," she rasped, ruffling his hair. "I'm bringing her home." The tracker pinged, a faint pulse 10 miles east, an abandoned mill by the Chattahoochee's muddy banks. Kiana slipped out, hoodie up, the night thick with fog, and crickets, her sneakers silent on gravel. Jamal's pleas tugged at her, but she pushed on, the signal sharpening as the mill loomed, its rusted silos clawing the sky, windows black with rot. She crouched behind a crumbling wall, her drone humming aloft, feeding footage. 5 masked men patrolled, rifles slung, Latrice bound in a corner, her braids tangled, her eyes defiant. Tillman paced, his broad bulk a shadow under flickering bulbs, a pistol gleaming in his fist. Kiana's chest tightened, her plan forming fast. She hacked the mill's old power grid with the jammer, plunging it into darkness. The guard's curses ringing out as she darted through a side hatch. The air stank of rust and oil, her drone buzzing ahead, its infrared painting Latrice's heat signature. She crept along a catwalk, her pocket knife gripped tight, and dropped a flashbang from her stash, Pierce's gift from training. It burst below, a blinding flare, and Tillman roared, his crew stumbling, rifles swinging blind. She slid down a pipe, landing soft, and sprinted to Latrice, slashing her ropes with a flick of steel. "Kai!" Latrice gasped, her voice hoarse, as Kiana hauled her up, her mum's legs wobbly but strong. Tillman spun, his pistol snapping toward them, and Kiana shoved Latrice behind a crate, the shot cracking wood inches from her ear. "So you're dead, girl," he bellowed, his boots thumping closer. But she lobbed the drone's smoke canister, a grey veil choking the room. They bolted for a stairwell, her tracker guiding them up, Tillman's curses lost in the haze. Her gadgets were her edge, years of robotics club turned battlefield now, and she'd outsmart him yet. The catwalk rattled under their weight, Latrice clutching her arm, when Tillman emerged from the smoke, his pistol raised. Kiana ducked, shoving Latrice ahead, but his shot caught her leg, a searing jolt tearing through her thigh. She stumbled, blood soaking her jeans, pain blurring her vision as she hit the metal. Tillman loomed, racking another round, his grin feral. "End of the line," he snarled, but sirens wailed sudden and close. Feds, not his crew, Pierce's backup crashing through. Kiana rolled, her jammer pulsing one last time, frying his phone as agents stormed in, their shouts a thunderclap. "Drop it!" Tillman fired wild, bullets pinging steel, but a Fed's rifle barked, dropping him with a chest shot, his bulk crumpling like a felled tree. Kiana crawled to Latrice, her legs screaming, blood pooling under her knee as agents swarmed, their vests glinting in the dark. "You're safe," one said, hoisting her up, medics rushing in with gauze and grit. Latrice clung to her, tears streaking her soot-streaked face, and Kiana exhaled, the mill's shadows fading as choppers buzzed overhead. Hargrove's trial flashed on a Fed's radio. Life sentence, conspiracy confirmed. Her leaks had nailed him. Tillman was dead. Justice, maybe, at last. They airlifted her to a hospital, her leg stitched and braced. Latrice and Jamal at her bedside, their hands a lifeline through the morphine haze. News hailed her. Teen rescues mom ends cop ring. Protests swelled, her badge a symbol again, and Kiana felt a hollow win, her family whole, Hargrove buried. She slept, dreaming of MIT's labs, her fight carving a legacy from the wreckage. But the glow faded fast. Media pivoted, their voices slick. Violent teen takes down cops. Her rescue spun as a bloodbath, her blackness a threat, not a triumph. MT emailed, the dean's tone cold. Enrollment delayed, public safety concerns. Her stomach sank, her diploma mocking her from the table, her heroism twisted into a noose. Latrice unplugged the TV, her prayers resuming, but the hate rolled. On X ablaze with slurs. Killer girl, thug with a badge. Kiana's leg throbbed, her victory ashes in her mouth. Tillman was gone, Hargrove locked, but the world still saw her as prey. She stared at her badge, its eagle emblem dull, wondering how much more it could cost her. Night settled, the hospital quiet save for Jamal's soft snores, when her phone buzzed. A leaked audio, anonymous, viral in minutes. Pierce's voice crackled. "We knew about the ring, let it fester for intel." Kiana was bait. Her breath stopped, the words a blade through her chest. The CIA had watched, waited, sacrificed her family for their game. She replayed it, her hands shaking, the truth sinking in. Every arrest, every bomb, every bullet. She'd been a pawn, her badge a leash. Latrice gasped, Jamal stirred, and Kiana's resolve fractured, a new fight dawning as the audio spread like wildfire. Kiana Brooks sat propped in the hospital bed, her leg braced in a stiff cast, the sterile air sharp with antiseptic and betrayal. The leaked audio looped on her phone, Pierce's voice a cold dagger. "We knew about the ring. Let it fester for..." Intel. Kiana was bait. Her hands trembled, the device nearly slipping as she replayed it, each word a brick crushing her chest. Latrice hovered, her braids tight with worry, her eyes darting between Kiana and the screen. Jamal slept in the chair, his sketchpad open to a half-drawn robot, oblivious to the storm breaking around them. Kiana's badge lay on the table, its eagle emblem glinting mockingly. She'd been a pawn, her fight a game to them. She dialed Pierce, her thumb slamming the call button, her voice a hiss when he picked up. "You used me," she spat, her leg throbbing as she shifted, pain fueling her rage. "Every arrest, every bomb, my mom, my brother, you let it happen." Pierce's reply came smooth, unruffled, a suit's polish over a snake's heart. "It was strategic, Kiana. We needed the bigger picture. You exposed Hargrove, stopped a war." She laughed, bitter and jagged, cutting him off. "I was 18, Pierce. You hung me out to bleed." His pause stretched. Then, "You're alive. That's what matters." Her vision blurred, tears burning. She'd trusted him and he'd fed her to wolves. Latrice grabbed her hand, her grip fierce. "What's he saying, Kai?" Kiana shook her head, ending the call, her breath ragged. "They knew, Mama. The CIA watched it all, let us burn for their intel." Latrice's jaw tightened, her prayers halting, replaced by a mother's fury. Kiana swiped to the audio file, her thumb hovering over share. She'd hacked precincts, saved lives. Now she'd turn their weapon back on them. She uploaded it to Atlanta Truth, X, every platform she could hit, captioning it, "CIA betrayed me. Here's proof." Her finger tapped send, and the world ignited. Riots erupted by noon. Atlanta's streets a cauldron of rage, chants of Kiana's truth shaking the city. News vans swarmed, their feeds live as protesters torched effigies of badges, glass, shattering under thrown bricks. The audio went viral, millions hearing Pierce's confession, hashtags exploding. CIA corruption. Justice for Kiana. Kiana watched from her bed, the TV flickering with flames, her name a war cry again. Hargrove's trial sealed shut, the leaked files and audio cementing his fate. Life in a supermax, no parole, his buzz cut, vanishing behind bars. She exhaled, a hollow victory, her leg a throbbing reminder of the cost. The nation split, some hailing her whistleblower guts, others branding her a traitor still. Politicians scrambled, the CIA issuing denials, misinterpreted context. But the damage stuck. Kiana stared at her badge, its shine tarnished, her MIT dreams a distant echo. She'd fought for justice, saved her family, toppled a ring, but the price was her soul, her future a battlefield she hadn't chosen. Latrice stroked her hair. Jamal woke, his grin fading as he saw her face. "What now, Kai?" he asked, and she didn't answer, her resolve fracturing under the weight. She quit the CIA that day, emailing Pierce a single line. "I'm done." Her badge hit the trash, its clatter a final note, and she leaned back, her leg aching, her mind churning. She'd go to MIT her way, no agency leash, her fight shifting to classrooms, code, a life she'd carve herself. The hospital buzzed, nurses whispering her name, but she tuned them out, plotting a path through the ashes. Hargrove was gone. Tillman. Dead, the ring shattered. Justice, maybe, but hollow as the wind through her broken world. Night fell, the room dim, save for the TV's glow, Latrice dozing, Jamal sketching again. Kiana's phone buzzed, a blocked number, and she answered, her gut twisting. Pierce's voice slithered through, low and venomous. "You're next, Kiana." The line clicked dead, her breath stopping, her eyes wide as she stared into the dark. He'd confessed, lost her, and now he'd hunt her, a new threat from the man who'd shaped her fight. Her badge was gone, but his shadow lingered, a promise of war she couldn't escape. She sank back, the cast heavy, her mind racing. Riots raged outside, her leak a spark that wouldn't die, but Pierce's call chilled her bones. Hargrove's life sentence, Tillman's grave. They weren't the end. They'd birthed this. She'd won freedom, exposed truth. But at what cost? Latrice stirred, Jamal's pencil scratched, and Kiana clutched her phone, the audio's echo, a lifeline and a curse. She'd flipped the game, but Pierce flipped it back, his voice a noose tightening around her future. The hospital walls closed in, and she knew this wasn't over. It was just beginning. Kiana Brooks' journey teaches us resilience against systemic injustice can ignite change, even when the odds seem insurmountable. Her story reveals the brutal reality of racial profiling, where innocence is no shield against corrupt power. From false arrests to bombings, Kiana faced relentless attacks, yet her intelligence and courage, honed by a CIA internship, turned the tide, exposing a racist cop ring. This underscores a vital lesson. Individual strength, paired with evidence, can challenge entrenched lies, though victory often comes at a steep personal cost. Her family's survival, her scholarship's near loss, and the betrayal by those she trusted highlight the collateral damage of such fights. Another takeaway is the double-edged sword of truth. Kiana's leaked audio sparked riots and justice, pinning Hargrove for life, but it also painted her as a target, her heroism twisted into villainy by a biased world. This shows how systemic racism doesn't just attack, it reshapes narratives to protect itself, leaving survivors to bear the scars. Her quitting the CIA reflects a final lesson. Sometimes walking away from tainted systems is the only way to reclaim your path. Pierce's threat at the end warns that battles don't end. They evolve, demanding constant vigilance. Kiana's saga urges us to question who justice serves and who it silences. It's a call to stand, to fight, to endure, even when the system bites back. So what do you think? Can one voice topple corruption, or does it just stir the hornet's nest? Drop a comment with your take, hit like if Kiana's grit inspires you, and subscribe and share to spread her truth. Thanks for joining this wild ride. Here's wishing you the strength to face your own storms and the wisdom to know when to rewrite the rules.